Good morning to you all. Welcome to this session. We have finished the first part of this session with meditation, and what now follows is a talk. We have currently a talk that is based on the life of the Buddha. In the previous session, I went through quite a lot of events surrounding the young life of the Buddha to be, who was Prince Siddhartha, reigning as the king of Sakyas, quite contrary to his wishes. He had to succeed his father and rule the kingdom of the Sakyas. And then we talked about his inevitable departure, or what is known as the Great Exit, because I would like to today elaborate on the meaning of this Great Exit, because whether we make, there are many exits through which we go out, but we often come back, and this is important because this is Great Exit of the young Prince Siddhartha, who leaves his family behind, and as well as his kingdom, and all the prestige and power and respect that his forefathers has earned so much so that his father was too proud not to pass that to his son would be a great disgrace to himself. So for him, passing that to his son and to reign the kingdom as his forefather has done would be the great fulfillment of his wishes. But the young Prince Siddhartha, to do just as his father had wished him, was not fulfilling any of his wishes. So this concept of great exit or renunciation is important for us to. We are not interested here historicity of the Buddha alone, but also the meaning that pertain and that point us, because we also make few exits here and there, and we get fed up with few situations. We try to walk away from them. How clean how clean liver we are. How successful any departure has been. Was it been merely an escape, running away from a situation that we can't deal? So this is the lesson we have when we talk about the life of the Buddha and how he, as a prince, not interested to stay in the place that he was given because of the great suffering in the world that he sees. No matter what a person achieves, the incessant suffering of dissatisfaction, craving, and not to mention illness and sickness and death and old age. Of course, these are everybody goes through, But most for him, that these generic sufferings, for a prince, most of his wishes were fulfilled. Whatever he needs, everything was provided for. For an ordinary person, it takes years to fulfill his wishes through the power and influences of his father, and he himself as a king. All the ordinary wishes were fulfilled, and that was not really making him happy, because for him the perennial suffering of beings who face inevitable old age, sickness, and death, these were the very crucial factors that he wanted to pay great attention to. And his becoming powerful didn't make any of the sufferings of the world that lighter. So the reason why he had to make the great decision to leave the very young family, and Mahayana teachings even believe his child was not born yet, and whether we take that line of the story or the other alternative story, that child was just born recently. So just to leave a wife that is pregnant or a wife that has just recently given birth is a big decision. It's no ordinary decision. A decision that earned him almost a bad name as being irresponsible. Still, people even today can't understand and fathom how Buddha left his family, Never did the people realize the depth of suffering that comes from clinging and grasping. And soon longer the clinging and grasping drags on, the suffering gets deeper. Very few are willing and are able to understand that, and therefore able to renounce. Most hang in there as if there's some kind of fulfilling their commitment, responsibility, so to speak. Sure, we want to be seen as one who fulfills his responsibilities. We don't want to tarnish our reputation because we want to be seen as one who is responsible. For Buddha, that was greatest hypocrisy. Most human beings try best, but they are not fulfilling even their own needs, responsibilities, happiness, let alone try to create an image to fulfill some responsibilities, but deep down he felt hollow and something was missing. Whether our understanding or reasons with which we may exit and separate or renounce certain situation or walk away is there or not. But the young Prince Siddhartha, when he left this notion of renunciation, that later on became quite an important aspects of his teachings for the followers to practice, was renunciation. Had Buddha himself made not that start of leaving his family and kingdom and all the life has meant everything for him except his body, he even gave up his jewelries and clothing. Even he changed his clothing. He doesn't want to wear the same clothes. He wants to be changed. He wants to be renewed. He doesn't want to stagnate in a status and a position that means so much to the material, but spiritually it deprives everything. Because of that, in order to make a swift and a very convincing change, he had to adopt the place where he stayed was different, what people he associated was different, what he wore was different, what he ate was different, how much he ate was different. Because of that, the great exit really meant not just running away from the role of a father or role of a king, but rather he wanted to exit from the whole circumstances, what we call the vicious cycle of existence. Most human beings, no matter what they did, no matter how great change they are trying to adopt, they still are in and around that very vicious cycle. Very vicious cycle, as long as they are still allowing themselves to be afflicted by craving and greed and hatred and ignorance. No matter what drastic changes they make, it still will catch them. They will still be the same, and it's just vicious cycle in different circumstances, with different people, different places. But there is no fundamental transformation in the mind. So what we mean by renunciation is a definite conviction where we find the mistakes that we acknowledge of our own is a very small proportional to the mistakes that has made the life in the first place. To come to the world for the Buddha, to the enlightened one, was already a huge mistake. Anything one commits on top of that is is an additional. So for him to see that his own way of life, yet creating another facets of life that is going to come back as a world that is continuously afflicted by one or another type of suffering, for him, even the imagination to come back in the world even as a king couldn't impress him. And therefore, that this deep inner revolutionary realization, deep definite conviction that one has to cure one's mind from the ills of hatred and ignorance and greed. This was the greatest. So his mind was completely on a different agenda. Of course, nobody questioned what was his point, because everybody knew that young Princess Siddhartha's departure from the home was as for spiritual reasons. He wasn't running away because the responsibility of fatherhood or kinghood was so difficult, or that he got beaten so many times by his rival kingdoms, or because he had a terrible time with his wife, or terrible time. That wasn't the reason. He probably had perfect time with being in the situation. He probably had the most ideal situation, what most people wish to have. but because the nature of suffering is dissatisfaction, nature of life is dissatisfaction. No matter how ideal situation we would like to be, for someone to have it is not quite the same. Still something is missing. This was the very realization that only one who have been there and done that would know. You see. Whereas ordinary human beings always is aspiring something material, success or progress, as if that will make oneself happy. Now, for a young Prince Siddhartha, he had the far-sighted vision to see the contrary, that one who has to depend on their own desire and wishing its fulfillment is really waiting for the worst. One who can overcome the desire, overcome the hatred, overcome the ignorance, can only have a possibility of making not only a material exit from this world, but also completely freeing the mind from the trappings of one's own making. So it is important for us not objectively or historically judge what Buddha did to his wife or family or kingdom, whatever. But what does it mean for us? I'm sure we have left few places. We have departed from few relationships here and there, as if we're going to sort of, get better by going away from this, because we don't want to be in that situation. As if, sure, we have done the similar leaps, but often we have broken legs and limbs, and we haven't really risen ever since from some departures, exits, or jumps. But that wasn't the case in the life of the Prince Siddhartha. His exit was definite with whatever pain and difficulty that was suffered by him and his family, and whatever sort of difficulty that ensued for at least 6 years. His whole 6 years after departure was 6 years of severe difficulties, called asceticism. Sitting under a bodhi tree is not the real difficulty. Sitting in a cool, open space, free, to us is difficult. Sunburned, hungry, thirsty. We think of those difficulties. He was overcoming difficulties of a different kind that nobody get tangible experience what it's like to get your hands on, to be working on that. Most people are completely trapped sensorily in the material world. They don't get their hands on to the overcoming of the reasons that makes oneself completely dissatisfied and discontented with whatever situation it is. So, therefore, this is important for us to. Buddha is an object of devotion and faith. It is only so that if we apply it in our life, and then trying to make some changes, or realizations. Have we run away from one place and repeated the same thing in a new situation? But this wasn't the case for the young Prince Siddhartha. He left and he never turned back. His aim was to overcome the poisons of the mind. After leaving family and kingdom, he went to different teachers to teach it, learned and studied various things. But in the end, he discovered that he must come to inner realization of his own, which completely eradicates the craving. The craving that seems to persist in everyone's being or existence. He wondered whether there was a state of mind that we could adjust at a wavelength of a mind where it is completely free of craving. And because of this keenness of the interest in this, that meant that one has to have complete time and space to be on one's own and to watch their thoughts and then measure and monitor the thoughts. This would not come. This doesn't come very easily unless one can find a great seclusion, a place of great solitude, that no one will bother you. No one will want anything from you, no one will ask you anything to you, no one will bring anything to you. You're completely on your own. One who is not completely adequately able to stay on their own and be alone and feel yet competent could not find the time to overcome the craving. And realizing this, did he make an exit far enough not to be troubled by the fellow people and countrymen that were all wanting to be with him. So he managed to persuade all the people that were sent by his family and parents to send them away and simply give 5 token friends, so that the family and friends are happy. At least 5 of them are there helping him in some way. But the young Prince Siddhartha need no human help. It is the human help that was causing more harm. And so therefore he was very much just letting them just observe from distance, maybe asking them to maintain a respectable distance, not too near, not too near, so that they will disrupt his meditation, not too far away to upset them and to the family members. So just ask them to just stay there. So it is important here, when we make our exit, our own little sort of walkaways in lives, what does that change to the relationship we walked away from? Sure, it was first 6 years, it was really completely misunderstood as far as everybody. There were a lot of people hurt. Maybe whole Sakya kingdom was hurt by him. And karmically, to carry that moral responsibility is already really quite weighty already. Now Buddha, as a Buddha to be, was carrying more of anticipation in his mind how wonderful it will be that he could make everybody happy. Whoever has the karmic maturity to hear the teachings and find the truth, he was more anticipating to do that rather than the trouble and worry that he thought he has brought upon himself by leaving the family. Because his intention was nothing selfish but altruism. Therefore his concentration definitely can remain unperturbed and undistracted. Because normally when we leave from somewhere, from one thing, we're more guilty the fact later on we left. We're not happy that we made a good departure. We can't be thankful to ourselves for having made the decision. We're still lingering on some kind of inconsistency that oneself is doubtful whether that was the right decision. Because we are not enlightened, that's the difference. And young Prince Siddhartha definitely was way ahead in not only making decisions, but at the same time not leaving trails of mistakes. As he left, he was cleaning them, sweeping them, sweeping them on his way back. So he wasn't leaving any trails that what he did and what he didn't. Any trail that he's left was complete a source of inspiration and strength and faith and devotion. So it is important for us to look from the point of view of separations. Some separations are much more tolerable because we come to a certain age, our parents expect us to leave, and we also leave. But nevertheless, some cultures doesn't really allow that. Sometimes culture doesn't allow that, and you're only allowed to go only when the parents think you should go. and so we go through many separations. We don't just go through separation and husband and wife problems. We go through many separations. How well we have realized them to be as a sign of maturity that we can leave our parents and go somewhere. It is a sign of great gratitude. And I have been now brought up by my parents in the same family all these years. Now I can go out outside and look after myself, and hopefully I'll be strong enough to repay the kindness. Now, with what motivation do we depart? What is our intention? You see, we're departing, all these parents have been nagging all these years, now when I turn 18 I can just go and be myself, you know. Now, if anybody who departs with this intention, sure will have a lot of difficulties. Karmically there will be a lot of difficulties. Just morally, it doesn't really make sense. Parents have given so much, you know. Virtually, parents became old by bringing up kids. All the arguments about the kids, all the fightings about the kids, they really have no other selfish intentions. So the two poor parents suffer because of us. And yet, we want to be free. We want to be free from these two warriors, you know. But we don't live very cleanly, you know. Some cultures, of course, different, but there's a different problem. There's a lot of grasping and clinging, you know. Sure, not all departures or separations are clean and happy, clean and peaceful. It's always a kind of unending kind of drags of suffering continues. Now, 6 years probably is an allowable time, for any hurt or misunderstanding that ensued from a disruptive separation. Even that happened in the life of the Buddha. 6 years may be allowable in the most disruptive form of separations. But any more than that is not really allowable. If a human person has grown and experienced growth since the departure, had they made a choice for the betterment of the both, then sure they would have learned and benefited from that departure rather than worse off. One who continued to resent, one who continued to blame, continue even after that, surely hasn't made any exit whatsoever. They probably have gone backwards. So this is very important when we look at the life of the Buddha. And sure, there were a lot of suffering continued in the Sakya kingdom family after the prince they have all wished for. That the kingdom was invested everything on how he was going to perform, and he just leaves everything in disarray. You can see the complex misunderstanding and sufferings that would have happened in the royal family as well as all the kingdom. So it was every other person in whole Sakya kingdom was depressed. You know, the mourning period of the loss of the future king of the Sakya really continued so many years until when they heard the enlightenment of the Buddha, enlightenment of the prince who have deserted them. Then they were all happy. They all became so happy on the night that they heard was the full moon full moon in May, when they heard his enlightenment, coincided with the birth of Ananda. Yeah, birth of Ananda to his uncle, one of his paternal uncles. You know, so that's why the Ananda was given the name joyful. Ananda means joyous. How joyous! That there's a birth of a cousin whose birth coincided with the enlightenment of the Buddha. They say, his departure was worth the while. Until then they were all carrying this heavy yoke of their own blame and distraught of all kinds, until they learn how to rejoice his departure, the problem was getting heavier and heavier. Now this was just in the whole kingdom, not to mention poor Yashodhara, the girl amongst millions of other would-be queens of Prince Siddhartha, was chosen out of the big crowd, and she just have the child, and there disappears husband. What kind of emotional problems and difficulties she had to go through. And for her sufferings, I would say, sufferings of her didn't finish after 6 years. For her, she could not rejoice to birth of another son, because her own never brought any happiness. Birth of her own never brought any happiness, and so for her to see see a birth of a child or another, a paternal family, didn't bring any happiness. So amongst all of the people in the Sakya kingdom, the two people who suffered most was the father, Shuddhodana, and Queen Yashodhara. These two was still unable to rejoice in this enlightenment. Probably they are sarcastic about his enlightenment. Enlightenment. I can just imagine, very clearly in the royal family going on this. Look at this, how he messed our life. They would be talking. He's got enlightenment, did he? We do that blaming all the time, don't we? We can't rejoice. Oh, he's left us, and now he's there, he's doing that. Oh. We can't, goodness gracious, he's now better off there. He don't rejoice. He said, look what he did to my life. And everything's done to us, of course. He didn't do anything. No, we didn't do anything. Everything is made to us. Now, for young Prince Siddhartha to leave palace was to say the opposite. I did it. I left my wife. I left the kingdom. I hurt everybody, but I had to do it. We had a very complicated karma to be husband and wife and son and father, but then I have to take full responsibility for my purpose of life. I'm not interested to be just one of the many kings whose name will just go perish and do little or no help to the world. If one doesn't do any good to the rest of humanity, what's the good of being another king? The kinghood was not popular these days already. It wasn't, So this departure traditionally known as definite conviction. So we have to looking at the life of the Buddha, and then try to see how many at times that when we make certain important decision, such as having to end a particular relationship that has continued from some time until the time that we think is not beneficial for us. Usually we don't really think it's beneficial. We're not really concerned about whether it's beneficial for the other. When it ceases to be beneficial to us, then we think, oh, I'm off. Whether our departure from them is any benefit to them or not, it doesn't really come to us, our mind. Now, we would like to think about that, because young Prince Siddhartha, for him, he wasn't heartless. He wasn't somebody who didn't feel the suffering that his wife and father would have to go through. He pondered over that very seriously. His very purpose was not just for him and his wife and father and kingdom of Sakya, but he was thinking that if his departure would mean a lot for the future generations, even if him and his family would have to go through some difficulties, they will have to go through the difficulty anyway, even if he left or not, because human beings tend to make enough of difficulties on their own without having to blame on others. So he was completely above those worries and guilt and regret of that. What kind of courage did he have to not to worry about what people will think about what he did? Courage, this is called courage. Atma, Mahatma. And a Mahatma means great heart, great being. Great being can make wonderful, great decisions. That's hard to make decisions. Ordinary people could not fathom. Of course, it's not that he didn't care about his wife. He probably cared too much. He cared so much that he had to do that. To be kind, you have to hurt a little bit at a time. Of course, the karma of Yashodhara and Shuddhodana two individuals who have earned to be father and wife of have quite a different karmic mixture that nobody will understand. Sure, until he left, they were top of the moon. They were on top of the moon because they say, my husband is the king of Sakya, my son. So they had a lot of their time. They have their turn to be so happy. Because their happiness came from craving, remember that? And grasping. So if they grasp, even grasping Buddha is cause of suffering. So it's not. So why did they suffer most? We may wonder. Why did they suffer most? Why were they the last ones to get enlightened of all the people in Sakya kingdom? When Sakya Buddha later returned and gave teachings, everybody got enlightened. These two were still stuck down there. Not because Buddha's fault. Sure, it's their own clinging and resentment, So these are great lessons for us, How much resentment do we have? And in the name of probably people who we love most, we have loved the most, we therefore carry more resentment too. Those love are therefore no love. It's attachment. They are clinging. They're just nice name we are given to them, given to the emotion of clinging somebody, possessing somebody, and but actually it's no love at all. It is grasping and craving. It is completely, subordinating somebody at the advantage of one's own happiness, short-lived happiness. So expecting others to do everything as we want them to do. So that was, of course, Yashodhara would have liked Buddha to die of end their sort of life by natural death. Either she dies first or he dies first. That would be her way of ideally expecting a relationship to end. And she was probably wanting that to happen. And anything that robs her of that opportunity was too much for her to lose. So her grasping and craving, her love of that karma that brought her as his wife, simply earned her more suffering because the great craving and grasping that she had to him as her husband. Mm-hmm. And so same went with the father, Father was very, very vehement right from the very beginning. No matter how many clear signals was he given by many, many soothsayers and people he consulted as wise people, he was told, even before birth, that your child is going to be a sage than a king. But he doesn't want to think. He doesn't want to accept reality. He saw something completely non-existent, and not even that he grasped it. This is what I mean. Grasping means not as something is there, realistically there to hold, but non-existing things we make up and then grasp, exaggerate things that non-existing. This was happening. That's why they took long time to gain enlightenment. That's why they had the most deepest sufferings. Because if they had genuine loving kindness, genuine love for Buddha or each other, they would have happiness. Because love is to wish other to have happiness and give benefit of anything that you try hard for. So that shows that love was non-existent. Genuine spiritual love was non-existent. There was attraction, there was admiration, there was great affection, but grasping. In the end result, it's all grasping. So the notion of Buddha exiting or departing from one situation is fearing that he's now he's grasping. Grasping is creating suffering. The most cherished status of human life, a powerful ruler who enjoys all the respect and influence, he has it, but yet he feels that's the most dangerous thing to have. He can see how grasping can make the less or no use of the whole situation. Because of that, one who could not let go of things usually suffers with the things they hold. The things they hold and possess becomes their assets of suffering. Things one let go usually become causes of happiness. Now this wasn't happening very easily to Yashodhara and Shuddhodana. So our parents, our father, or mother, or sister, or whoever is most loved objects in our life we have a lot of work to do with them. We have earned so much karma by mutual grasping and clinging. So much so that our consciousness in the bardo, in the intermediates, choose that particular mother. That particular mother. Why is that happening? There's amazing mutual karmic forces that is bringing her together. And therefore a life happens as a result. So notion of clinging and grasping and what it brings so much suffering is the meaning of really, departing from one difficult situation. Sure, Buddha wasn't walking away from one difficult place to a much easier place, did he? He was walking to a much difficult place too. Because when we walk away from places, we are trying to see that we don't have to face that problem or anything similar. We want a much easier situation. So our departures are usually definitely running away so difficult that we wish that we can get a sigh of relief. Whereas for the Buddha, it's to go and sit under a Bodhi tree and leave everything behind, far harder to do. Nobody has done it. But to stay as a king was much easier. Too easy to be true. Couldn't believe that anybody can have such karma. But he doesn't want to let that karma, to be born as a prince, go astray. How does a person utilizes his or her status or position? Much beneficial, a benefit that will keep generating benefit. This was the vision. This was the greatest vision in his mind. He wasn't worried just temporarily how much hurt and pain his wife would go. That would mean that he will be crying, he had to cling and grasp to that and nothing but he could not, he would have to give up everything he would have a vision to do. Now, not everybody has the compatible compassion and wisdom to match that. Often we would like to think making that decision, but often we ourselves become our own critic for making such decisions. That shows we lacked wisdom. Maybe we have done with the best intention there and then, but we later on realizes we really haven't had sufficient wisdom to match that. And that's where we, however many decisions we made, we sometimes feel very sad about those things. We are not growing, we're not changing with the actual purpose for which we came out for. Now it is a great source of inspiration for the life of the Buddha from this point of view that is not that Buddha didn't know the suffering that his wife and father and the rest of the people will go through, but he felt that suffering is meaningful suffering. It will eradicate all the negative karma that has earned through grasping and attachment. Now when he comes back, later on when he comes back to the Sakya kingdom, after enlightenment, what is called the meeting between father and son. There's no mention of meeting between son, husband and wife, by the way. And so, because the Buddha's father sends a lot of messengers, all the messengers send, we heard, but father is sort of half-heartedly happy that he's enlightened. I think after everybody go and get teachings and come really transformed, and he was still feeling miserable there. He said, maybe I should go and invite him as a teacher, not as a son. And then everybody, he said, he select perfectly carefully very special messengers. He'd give them all strict advices what they should do, how they should, to bring him back. Everybody goes there and they become monk and never come back. So they were very bad messengers. So that was happening quite a lot of time. This is too much for the father to go through. He says, look, this is what he does. I send every messenger, he wouldn't even send anybody saying he's coming or not coming, and it just keeps them there. Maybe. Just imagine this is happening to you. And it's completely frustrating. I think finally, he found one monk, one very faithful, in that he said, look, no, even if I'm going to be completely influenced by the Gautama and to become a monk as them, I'll still make a vow to come back and tell you what exactly he said. So this messenger, I can't remember exactly who this was, probably Katyayana. And this messenger goes with several companions, goes to the Buddha saying that all of the kingdom people in Kingdom of Sakya is rejoicing in your enlightenment. They have now sort of recovered from their own suffering of their own making. They can't wait to see your glorious enlightened being and receive you in the Sakya kingdom and truly, reap the rewards of your great asceticism and all the difficulties that everybody have gone through. Please return at our calls. I, even though will be more likely to become monk, but I still have to go back and tell them. And of course, the time that was taking long for the Buddha to actually come back was no accident. It was necessary. Because when the Buddha said, finally acknowledged that he will go to visit his father, he sent the messenger back saying, look, yes, I'm very happy to come. I never said I wouldn't come. I never left. He said, I never really left with you guys out of loving kindness and compassion. How could I not come? Don't think that I left you with great anger and now I've changed my heart and then come back. That's not happening with me. I've never left you guys. So it's called definite conviction because it's not just merely running away from a difficult situation and then come back and patch up when situation improves. This wasn't the case. But the Buddha, because his sincere motivation to depart was for the well-being of all living beings, he wanted to discover the teachings, a way of ending the suffering that beings don't need to have. He was wondering whether it's possible to find that teachings. And his arduous and wondrous journey that took him so long to realize this was the very love that he had. His love was genuinely loving kindness. Meditation on loving kindness is these days taught. If we think we know love, we don't need to be taught how to develop loving kindness. Why do we need to be taught how to meditate loving kindness if we have attracted all the people we have out of love? They haven't, unfortunately. I mean, we would like to believe it, but it looks quite different. There's strong karmic forces working in our way to make you feel so much love and admiration and attraction to somebody, but the forces are working in a different reason. So he reassured that he was coming, but gave strict instruction under which he could be received. He said, I, as a fully ordained monk, cannot enter lay people's home. He said, so therefore build an appropriate monastery outside the city so that me and my disciples can arrive and stay there. Of course, then Father Shuddhodana used all his resources, quickly arranged site, chose the site and built a monastery. And of course that will take quite a while, but later on there is one whole sutra called Meeting Between Father and Son. It's very interesting. There was a lot of interesting dialogue. So it is within that dialogue that comes that suffering of a father and his grasping shows very clearly. Even enlightened being like Buddha comes to his doorstep, still the father still haven't stopped his nagging habit. And maybe it's lucky that his mother passed away. Mothers do a better job sometimes than father in nagging because of their amazing bond with the child. Of course, Buddha had his stepmother waiting on the corner. She wasn't going to be easy and quiet girl. She is the one who brought him up. She is the one who fed him. She is him clothed and everything for all this hard, first I mean, years, virtually from the very birth. After a week, his birth, he never saw his mother. Mother passed, never saw his stepmother and auntie, both. She's the same person. Prajapati Gautami. Prajapati was not going to be easy, and and of course, young Prince Siddhartha knew that knew that was going to happen. But a lot of the dialogues and discourses, communication between the father and son and the various family members coming in, and shows that human beings still want their object to be Buddha to be a possession. Still, it's mine. Actually, Yashodhara told her son, Rahula, "That's your father. That's my husband." She wanted to be acknowledged as his wife. But the Buddha, that wasn't going to benefit anybody. That's simply going to massage her ego. And she's never going to get anything from him as a husband. So why would he take that identity? Buddha was very good in sort of correcting everybody as far as his identity was concerned. That it started early time when he first met the five companions who abandoned him, and they called him, "Here comes the Gautama." They say, "I'm not Gautama anymore. I'm the Blessed One." I'm the fully enlightened, the Blessed One. Of course, ever since that, they never used the word Gautama. And of course, when the Buddha arrived in the monastery outside Kapilavastu, the reunion of the father and son and husband and wife and father and son, another father and son, that's his son. According to Mahayana teaching, he never met. According to Theravadan teaching, son was already born. So there will be at least 6-7 years of difference if both of the two stories were to be considered. Anyway, so the child, the Buddha's son, called Rahula, was definitely a different kind. He had an aptitude that his father would have best wished for right from the early days. There was no difficulty in persuading him or influencing him. He just had to see his father, that's it. He would quite easily step inside that way of life without any trouble whatsoever. Because it was happening in a time when the whole kingdom and citizen of the kingdom has completely changed. Virtually within about 20-30 years after, there was nobody left in Kapilavastu because everybody became Mangana. So the whole Sakya line came to an abrupt end as a result of that, almost like similar to emptying the samsara. There's definitely emptying of Sakya clan because nobody busily kept on going in the material world a kind, but rather persevere on the path of the enlightened one that their prince has now taught about. So it is this renunciation business is not a complete neglect, renouncing something and never turning back. So my interpretation of renunciation from the point of view of the Buddha, and also from the point of view of what we should try our best, reason we renounce anything should not be out of fear alone, but greatest hope. If we depart or exit from anything out of only fear alone, then it will not be translated as a definite conviction, because we didn't realize what our fear can turn into. But compassion and motivation to benefit for the sake of other, then we might be departing for the sake of their benefit, seeing that they are having more hard time by our being there, and they themselves are begging for it, so to speak. And one also may not feel completely ready emotionally to depart, but nevertheless, that seems to be the best wished for situation. Now, very few people can be such a calm and clear-headed enough to think carefully to make an exit with this kind of motivation for the benefit of others. It looks like most people would see somebody leaving from somebody would think that they went for selfish purposes. They neglected them, they left them as such. Most people would. So one has to carry that stigma, I suppose. One has to be daringly courageous to be able to carry that label or identity, that whatever people may designate, if one has to make a decision. So definite conviction, therefore, to my mind, is not, from the Buddha's point of view, is not just leaving. He wasn't really departing people or his family as such. He was really departing from the three poisons. He wanted to find a way to get rid of one's three poisons, and one of the first steps that one needs to take was the objects to which we seem to have generate these three most poisons: greed, hatred, and ignorance. So although those objects did appear like objects of love, but instead of increasing one's love and dedication, giving for them, this very supposed love at the very beginning turns into becoming object of anger, object of hatred, object of almost every negativity. So because this was happening, so one can't completely get free from the defilements unless you are freer from the objects. Freer from the objects. The very nearness of oneself with certain people and situation exacerbate one's defilements. Therefore, keeping a distance would mean that one will find a breathing space as to what should one adopt as a principle way of reacting to the situation. So what the seclusion practices. So the period that Buddha did go away from form and went to his meditation is what is called seclusion practices. Seclusion practices later on became a retreat in Buddhist teachings and practices. However short they are, the idea is that we all earn a little secluded area of time and place, so that we are left to have in a situation where we can think clearly and calmly and compassionately, because otherwise in that commotion of every activities we just don't have the space and time to even think what we're doing with ourselves. So for the young Prince Siddhartha to disrupt his role as a ruler of Sakya kingdom and go into meditation was what is later became called seclusion practices. These seclusion practices, within that he completely realized that the purpose of his departure was not abandon the people, but to abandon the greatest cause of misery, and that is greed, hatred, and ignorance. Now, because the objects of love and objects of hate were so associated with how much free we become from those three or not, therefore there was the necessity. That's what they say. If you're near a dog, you're more likely to be bitten. So the whole idea of just keeping away from the dog is so that you're less likely to even hear them bark, let alone being beaten. So it's this whole idea of departure or renunciation, however short it is, or going from one, we should see them as our own breast token of benefiting others. Is that because if we are calm, compassionate, clear-minded, by availing that time for ourselves in a situation that we don't get very easily, of course we're doing it. If we're doing it for our own, that will be very selfish. That is not definite conviction. That is the kind of exit we keep coming back and coming through it again. But one who has a motivation with which one leaves a situation with the kind of intention not only for oneself but for the other, definitely have a very empowering impact on the people in the future. Not temporarily in the difficult times, but in the future. Sure, the whole Sakya kingdom became beneficiary of the enlightenment of the Buddha. So much so, the very place where he was born, very place that he grew up, now is a sanctified land of great pilgrimage. No great kings, palaces are visited as eagerly as remnants of the ruins of Sakya kingdom. This is precisely the vision I was talking about, precisely the far-sighted vision with which an enlightened being therefore takes the role to make a decision which which nobody can fathom at the surface level. But nevertheless, when he returned from his great journey out home, and when most disciples of the Buddha, including his own family and relatives, didn't take very long. First, a second sermon, they're already enlightened. They're already on the path of liberation. Because of the amazing karmic connection with him, and to have him as the Buddha, that we at this end of the time feel, oh, why did we miss him? But for them, it was their uncle, it was their brother, it was their husband, it was their son. For them to see his transformation, the whole identity of him to see the son and daughter or any ordinary identity was wrong. For them to see him as a fully enlightened one, and then to hear the teachings from the mouth of one who's fully realized that, through that very arduous practice of ascetic practice of 6 years of deep meditative contemplation, their faith and devotion and courage and inspiration that they felt would be quite so powerful to shake even this earth. The enlightenment of the Buddha himself is said to have shaken the earth 6 times, much more powerful than any earthquake would, but without anybody's house collapsing. I don't know what kind of earthquake that is. There's an earthquake which shakes 6 different ways, you know. It's not the earthquake that just opens and everybody goes in it. It's not that kind of earthquake that shakes 6 different ways, 6 completely different ways. that generates everybody with hope. One who feels the earthquake knows it's not an ordinary natural disaster. This is an omen of a great enlightenment, great wonderful thing happening in the world. It affected everybody. Everybody remembered that. So every major event of the Buddha was having such great impact wherever people lived at that time. So the history and teachings that record the details of the Buddha, which are mainly recorded in the teaching called Vinaya. In a Vinaya, you would usually hear them as the vows and precepts of lay people and monks and nuns. But when you read the full, about 20 volumes of Vinaya, it's filled with all these stories. All the different legends and stories and anecdotes about the Buddha and his life, his relationship, his discourses, how he constituted particular vow and precepts on a particular incident. All these are detailed in the Mahayana Vinaya. Vinaya so shows all this. Because with this story and parables became very important way of teaching people without boring them. Some are better storytellers by remembering the very stories. So the sutras record all these details about the life of the Buddha and his relationship, his dealings, his teachings, kind of conversation they had with the various people. So there is no one book in the called Life of the Buddha as such in the ordinary, canonical literature, except some later, I would say, post 3rd century text. Prior to that, all were in the form of all of sutras. Sutras means bits and pieces. Sutras means threads of stories, bits and pieces, and they all compiled together, and then become whole compilation of the stories. So the one who is able to hear and understand the life of the Buddha, instead of making a judgment on the life of the Buddha, or even for us to tell anybody our own story to each other, we cannot make really judgment on their life. We can only empathize what happened in their life and how they coped and how they handled it. But what lesson that we draw from these stories is to see how differently have we also handled our reasons of leaving, departing, for the sake of betterment, but often not quite achieving that wish for results by one departure or the other. But still, our incessant craving doesn't seem to abate at all. no matter how many U-turns we may make. But still, the fundamental causes of the restlessness, of the craving and dissatisfaction doesn't seem to be seen or realized. And whereas the one who realizes that makes those events, an unfolding of those events, something very completely life-changing, experiences, to the extent of the everything that has happened are path of the journey, a journey on the path. It's not that formal practice are not just the practice, but practice is how one incorporates or handles the difficulties in the situation that we have them. So the practices and teaching that one formally adopts are simply reminders how best one should adapt and use these teachings in those circumstances of events that sometimes happen beyond our control. But how do we do it? If something very precious that in our lives just is lost, what do we do with that? What does that talk teach us about in non-attachment? We can't say, I love so much, I can't let it go. Because we know we don't. We are just grasping. But for seldom we don't realize it's my grasping that's making me do this. We don't have the conscience to say this. We want to be seen by people say, yeah, that person loved so much that he couldn't do it. Yes, that's true. But deep down it's craving and grasping alone that is making the misery to increase. How could love increase suffering? How could loving kindness increase suffering? That's completely wrong. And therefore one realized the very symptoms of one's things we do shows that it came out of attachment. Because attachment brings suffering for both oneself and thing one is attached to. Whereas loving kindness does exactly opposite. It completely let the other free and oneself free. And one who doesn't freedom to other doesn't gain any freedom themselves. So loving kindness, it's very important when we talk about definite conviction, is a conviction that love and attachment should not be confused. And the fact that we can meditate, we need to meditate, is because of that. Our mind is not clear enough to discern this. And when one's mind is very clear, meditation is very clear, then one realizes the distinction between the two. Distinction between the two. Why we meditate? If a meditation is good, we will know how much is grasping, how much. If we know the symptoms of grasping, what it does to us and others. We know symptoms of loving kindness, what it will do to us, what it will do to others. Loving kindness by definition is wishing others to have happiness and wishing ourselves with it. Whereas grasping and craving is possessing something for our own benefit, but usually at our disadvantage. And not realizing that is a great disadvantage, the great disability. The word muni means able. But those who aren't are the opposite. Muni means sage, literally sage, but actually means, Tibetan word tupa means one who's capable, one is completely able. Those who couldn't govern their own rasas or negativities are totally disabled. Any form of disability is no disability. One who couldn't acknowledge this disability. Now that was the very reason we call exit. Great exit is one who really wanted to become able to do that. One who's not able to do that is continuously in the vicious cycle. It's going to be whether it's like a bee caught in that bottle where he flies up, top touching his head with the lid or the bottom or side, it's still in the bottle. Likewise, whatever incidents and changes occur, one is still not further away than in that very perpetual wanderers. Perpetual wanderers. Wandering that is caused by one's own not knowing the causes of it. And therefore one may do the same thing many times without realizing one has come back again. One is doing that again. Now one who couldn't stop that cycle, turning, continue to remain in this vicious cycle of existence. The definite conviction I was referring to is not definitely convinced that this is a terrible family I'm in, or this is a terrible kingdom I'm born in. That's not definite conviction. Definite conviction that the very turning of the cycle made by craving and the grasping, recognizing that and try to really stop that very hub. The hub of the wheel is the craving and ignorance. Unless I'm able to obliterate that, I will continue to remain no matter what. So with that definite conviction, when a person meditates or prayers, then they're not doing the prayer for mundane purposes. They're not doing prayer for mundane purposes or short-lived reasons. They're doing for much deeper reasons, and that is called definite conviction. That is called separation of mother of all separations. Perfect separation is where one doesn't associate anymore with the same thing. The Tibetan analogy for definite conviction is like throwing spit on the floor, and it would never come back in the mouth. So just like one has to completely be convinced. There's so definite conviction that this is to be thrown out. And it usually comes from one's own mouth. That's the whole hard bit about it. Almost so inseparable a thing we don't dare to separate from. So that we don't want to throw at anything, because it seems so much us, so much like us, that we don't want to get rid of, because us seems like worth preserving. For one who is living in an illusory world, us and me is one that should be preserved, not to be thrown away. So one who couldn't have definite conviction, all of the things that one is possessing, would not realize selflessness, because self is busy preserving that very itself, and all of its ignorance and trappings that it is completely, incapable of knowing what they are. So I like all of us to think a lot when we talk about life Buddha, particularly about life of Buddha and his departure from the home, in the context of how do you best deal with separation? What is there to learn from the life of the Buddha? How better should we come out if we're going to make a decision of that kind? And it's not that we won't need to make the decision. We will, sooner or later, we make those decisions. We need to make decisions. This doesn't mean from permanent relationship. This could be from very short relationships. A place you work a couple of months, but you want to go. What do you go with? What motivation? What will you tell your friends about that working place after you left? These are the sorts of things. Because people leave, but they don't leave. They haven't really gone. They keep talking. Emotionally, they're still with them. This negativity is still nurtured and generated as much as they would be if they are with them. That's no benefit. So one has to this is what a clean separation should be, that one really looked at it very carefully and then realized what one has benefited from it, and if not much has come out of it, stopping it from continuing. When one has that, one doesn't want to revisit that anymore. One doesn't want to anticipate, or one doesn't want to trace those things anymore. Negative memory is simply, practices the very thing we want to depart from. A lot of regressive therapy only does is practices the things we have failed. That's not a good thing to practice. So this is the very essence about definite conviction of the Buddha departing his family. So we'll conclude here. Thank you very much. By the merit of this, may we attain the state of omniscience and defeat the evil enemies of defilement. May I liberate all sentient beings from the samsara oceans, traveling ways of birth, old age, sickness, and death. By listening to the excellent, precious mind and teaching, whatever boundless merit I have acquired, may all sentient beings become precious and stand as a vessel to return the excellent and precious mind. May the supreme and precious Bodhicitta take birth where it had not done so, where it has been born, may it increase abundantly.